Intersections, conversations. Frustrated, angered, confused, or just plain tired of the polarizing conversations about race? Not sure what to say, what to think, or even what to do? Well, you've come to the right place. As we move beyond the rhetoric to look for solutions that reduce health disparities and create better working environments. As my grandmother would say, it has to come up to come out. Welcome to our Intersections Conversations, where diversity, equity, and inclusion meet.
Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're tackling something that's so relevant, especially in today's workplace restorative justice. But there's a twist.
Okay.
We're looking at how it applies to those everyday microaggressions, those little things that can really impact a team's dynamic,
Yeah, absolutely. It's taking a concept, usually reserved for these larger conflicts and using it to address those subtle but persistent issues that can really, like you said, chip away at that trust and respect over time.
Totally. It's like that saying, death by 1,000 paper cuts, right?
Right.
Individually, these comments might seem small, but wow, their cumulative effect can be significant.
Yeah.
And we've got some fascinating research here that outlines a whole model for tackling this. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's start with the basics. What exactly is restorative justice, and how does it differ from, say, traditional disciplinary action?
That's a great question, and it gets to the heart of why this approach is so powerful.
Oh.
You see, traditional disciplinary models, they often focus on punishment, identifying the offender, handing down those consequences.
Right.
But restorative justice, it kind of flips that script.
Okay.
It's less about who's at fault and more about understanding the harm that was caused and how to repair it.
So instead of just saying, you mess up, here's your penalty, it's about opening up a dialogue and figuring out how to move forward in a way that actually rebuilds relationships, not just punishes the offender.
Precisely. And this is especially crucial when we're talking about microaggressions because oftentimes the person who made the comment, they might not have even intended any harm. But intent and impact, they don't always line up.
Okay, so let's say someone makes an offhand comment that, while seemingly harmless, kind of reinforces a stereotype. How would this restorative justice model play out in a real-world workplace scenario?
Okay, well, imagine this. You overhear a colleague complimenting a female coworker by saying, "You're so much smarter than you look." On the surface, it might sound like a compliment,
Right.
but it carries an implicit bias, right?
Yeah.
Now, instead of ignoring it or just telling the person they messed up, a restorative approach would involve a facilitated dialogue between the person who made the comment, the person who is impacted by it, and often a neutral third party to help guide the conversation.
Yeah, it strikes me that having that neutral facilitator could be key, especially when you've got those power dynamics at play, like between a manager and their direct report.
Absolutely. Power dynamics can add a whole other layer of complexity.
Right.
We'll definitely delve into that more a bit later.
Oh, okay.
But for now, think of this model as having three key players: the impacted party, the initiating party, and the community of care,
Okay.
which in a workplace setting would be the overall environment and culture.
I like that term community of care because it highlights that it's not just on the individual who messed up to fix things, right? It implies a shared responsibility for creating a workplace where these kinds of conversations can happen safely and constructively.
You hit the nail on the head. Microaggressions, even unintentional ones, can really damage someone's sense of belonging and well-being at work.
Yeah.
Addressing them effectively, it isn't just about ticking a box. It's about cultivating an environment where everyone feels seen, heard, and respected. And that requires a collective effort.
So it's about creating a space where people feel comfortable speaking up in the first place, knowing they'll be heard, and that the focus is on understanding and growth, not blame or punishment.
Exactly. Now, let's unpack how this facilitated dialogue actually works in practice.
Okay.
What are the steps involved? How does it differ from just having a conversation?
Yeah, because I imagine there's a certain art to navigating these conversations in a way that feels, productive and not like a forced HR intervention.
You're right. It's not as simple as just gathering everyone in a room and hoping for the best.
Right.
It requires structure, empathy, and a genuine commitment to understanding, all perspectives.
So let's break it down. What does that structure look like?
It all starts with finding that neutral facilitator.
Okay.
This could be someone within the company, like an HR representative trained in mediation, or an external facilitator, brought in for their expertise in restorative practices.
And what's the facilitator's role in all of this?
Yeah.
Are they like a referee, a therapist,
Yeah.
a mediator?
Think of them more like a guide.
Okay.
Their job is to create a safe space for open and honest dialogue. They make sure everyone gets a chance to speak their truth, without interruption, while also ensuring the conversation stays focused on repairing harm rather than assigning blame.
That sounds crucial, especially when you've got emotions running high or those power imbalances we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. A skilled facilitator can help navigate those complexities with sensitivity and ensure that everyone feels heard and respected, regardless of their position within the company.
This is all making me realize that there's a lot more to addressing microaggressions than just saying, well, just apologize, move on. It's about acknowledging the impact those actions have and creating a space for real healing and understanding to take place.
Absolutely. It's about shifting from a culture of blame and punishment to one of accountability and growth. And that requires a fundamental change in how we view these interactions and the systems in place to address them.
It sounds like a pretty big undertaking.
Yeah.
What are some of the key elements that need to be in place for this kind of restorative approach to really take root and thrive within a company culture?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right.
It's one thing to have a model on paper, but putting it into practice, that requires a genuine commitment from everyone, especially those in leadership positions.
So it's not just about talking the talk.
It's about walking the walk and making sure those values are reflected in the company's actions and policies.
100%. But even with the best intentions, there are some common pitfalls that leaders often fall into, particularly when it comes to navigating those subtle power dynamics we talked about earlier.
Okay.
And unpacking those pitfalls is what we're going to dive into after a quick break.
Okay, so let's talk about those pitfalls. I have a feeling we've all been there, maybe on the receiving end, or maybe we've even been the ones, unintentionally creating a difficult situation. Where do things tend to go wrong, even when, everyone's coming from a good place?
You've hit on a really important point, right? Good intentions, they don't always equal positive impact, right?
Right.
And these pitfalls, they often stem from that disconnect.
Right.
One of the most common ones I see is what I call the illusion of choice. The illusion of choice. That sounds intriguing. Unpack that one for me.
So it's when managers often trying to empower their team, they present tasks or opportunities as optional, when in reality there's this unspoken expectation to say yes.
Oh, wow. I've been in that situation, like when your manager says, hey, and you're going to lead this new project. It'll be great exposure. But you just know that if no one volunteers, they've already got their eye on someone specific, and it probably won't be framed as positively then.
Exactly. And because of that power dynamic, the boss versus the employee, it can be really tough to say no.
Right.
Even if you're already overloaded or the task just doesn't align with your goals, you're worried about seeming unambitious or negative.
Yeah,
right.
Totally. So how can managers avoid accidentally creating this illusion of choice? How can they ensure their team members genuinely feel empowered to, make their own decisions?
It all boils down to transparency and clear communication.
Okay.
Instead of who wants to take this on.
Yeah.
Try, I need a volunteer for this project. It's a great opportunity, but it's also intensive. So no worries if it's not the right fit for you right now.
Right.
Make it crystal clear that opting out is perfectly okay and won't be held against them.
So explicitly stating that no is an acceptable answer without fear of negative consequences, that makes sense.
Right.
What's another pitfall that leaders should be aware of?
Okay, this one's called misinterpreting enthusiasm.
Okay.
Picture this. A manager proposes a new initiative, all bright-eyed and excited about it. The team, wanting to be supportive, not rock the boat,
Right.
nods along.
Yeah.
But deep down, they might have reservations they're hesitant to voice.
Oh, 100%. I've totally been that employee, smiling and nodding while thinking this is going to be a disaster.
Right. And because the manager is caught up in their own enthusiasm, maybe blinded by their position of power, they miss those subtle cues that their team isn't fully on board.
Right.
They mistake compliance for genuine buy-in, which can lead to problems down the line.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
So how do we encourage more honest feedback in these situations? How do we get past that fear of disagreeing with the boss and create an environment where people feel safe, like speaking their minds, even if it's not what leadership wants to hear.
It's about fostering what we call psychological safety within the team. This means actively soliciting feedback, even if it's dissenting, and making it clear that you value honesty over blind agreement. And sometimes it means acknowledging that power dynamic directly.
Okay.
A manager could say, look, I know I'm the boss, and that can make it intimidating to disagree, but I really need your honest opinions on this. Tell me what you think.
Being that upfront about the power dynamic is probably a powerful move in itself. It shows you're self-aware and you genuinely value their input.
Exactly. The more you can name the elephant in the room, the less power it holds.
Right.
Okay, ready for another common pitfall?
Hit me with it. The more aware we are of these traps, the better we can navigate them.
Okay, this one's a bit more nuanced, and it's called performance pressure as a motivator. It happens when managers, with the best of intentions, link growth opportunities to performance in a way that can feel, coercive.
I've definitely seen this happen, like saying, if you want that promotion, you need to knock this project out of the park, or even tying bonuses to, like, taking on extra work.
Yes. While healthy challenges are great, the problem is that when those challenges are tied to someone's, career progression or job security,
Right.
it can start to feel like a threat, not an opportunity.
Especially if you're already feeling insecure or worried about your, standing in the company.
Right.
It's like that saying, you get more bees with honey than with vinegar. Sometimes a little encouragement goes a long way.
Yeah.
But too much pressure can backfire.
100%. So how can leaders ensure they're offering growth opportunities in a genuinely supportive way? It's about making it clear that you value effort and growth, not just, hitting every target. It's okay to make mistakes.
Right.
That's how we learn.
So it's not about, dangling a reward or punishment. It's about fostering a growth mindset.
Yes.
You want people to feel safe taking on challenges and stretching themselves, not like they're walking a tightrope.
You got it. It's about creating an environment where people are encouraged to learn and grow without feeling like their worth is tied to every single outcome.
Okay, these are already giving me a lot to reflect on.
All right.
What other pitfalls should leaders kind of watch out for?
Well, sometimes it comes down to how we use our power as leaders.
Okay.
A big one is over-reliance on hierarchical power. This can be tempting, especially in, fast-paced environments.
Right.
Because it's easier to just fall back on, because I said so.
Yeah.
But here's the thing.
Okay.
Even if you have the authority, constantly flexing that power muscle can create a culture of fear and compliance, not one of genuine buy-in or, shared ownership.
It's about finding that balance between asserting your authority and creating a space where people feel empowered to contribute their ideas and perspectives. It's the difference between leading through fear and leading through respect, I imagine.
Exactly. It's about asking yourself, am I using my power to make decisions for my team, or am I using it to empower them to make decisions with me?
That's a great distinction. So practically speaking, how can a leader shift from that, my way or the highway approach to a more collaborative one?
It starts with genuinely valuing your team's input.
Okay.
Actively seek out their perspectives, even and maybe especially when they differ from your own.
Okay.
Involve them in the decision-making process whenever possible, and be open to the possibility of not always getting your way.
It's about being willing to let go of the need to be right all the time.
Yes.
And recognizing that sometimes the best solutions come from, unexpected places.
Absolutely. Okay, ready for another pitfall? This one's close to my heart.
I'm all
This
ears.
one's about recognizing that we're not all motivated by the same things. I call it lack of empathy for individual differences.
Okay.
What motivates one person might completely demotivate another.
This is so true. I once had a manager who thought they were giving me this amazing opportunity by asking me to present at this huge conference. Problem was, I was terrified of public speaking.
Yeah.
What they saw as a reward, I saw as my worst nightmare.
That's a perfect example. The key here is to remember that everyone on your team is different. And what motivates them will be different too.
Right.
There's no one-size-fits-all approach to leadership.
So how do you actually put that into practice as a manager? I mean, you can't be expected to be a mind reader, right?
You're right. You don't have to be a mind reader, but you do need to be a good listener.
Okay.
Pay attention to what your team members say about their work styles, their career aspirations, what they find challenging, and what energizes them.
It's about treating your team like individuals, not just cogs in a machine, right?
Precisely. When you take the time to understand what makes people tick, you can tailor your approach to leadership accordingly. You'll become a much more effective leader, And your team will be happier and more engaged as a result.
This is all gold. Any other pitfalls we should be aware of before we kind of move on?
Just one more for now, and it's a big one. Unclear communication of expectations.
Okay.
It seems obvious.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how often assumptions are made and things are left unsaid.
Oh, I'm sure I'm guilty of this one too. It's easy to assume that everyone's on the same page.
Right.
But that's often where those misunderstandings happen.
Exactly. And when those expectations aren't clearly communicated from the start, it can create a lot of anxiety and pressure, especially if employees are worried about being penalized for not meeting some unspoken standard.
So how can leaders make sure their expectations are, like, crystal clear? It sounds like it's all about communication, communication, communication.
You got it. Be explicit and detailed when communicating tasks, goals, deadlines, anything and everything that's expected.
Right.
Don't leave anything open to interpretation.
Okay.
And don't assume that giving directions once is enough.
Right.
Check in regularly, ask clarifying questions, and, offer support.
It's about creating a culture of open communication where questions are encouraged, and it's always safe to ask for clarification that removes so much of the guesswork and helps everyone feel more secure and confident in their roles.
Exactly. Now, I know we've covered a lot of ground here, from the power of restorative justice and addressing microaggressions to the common pitfalls that can derail even the best-intentioned leaders. But there's one crucial element we still need to explore. How do we move beyond simply addressing individual incidents and start creating a workplace where these issues are less likely to arise in the first place? How do we build that community of care we discussed earlier?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Sure.
It's not enough to just clean up messes. We need to prevent them from happening in the first place. So how do we create that kind of, like, positive, proactive environment? What are the key ingredients?
That's exactly what we'll dive into after the break.
Okay.
We'll explore the essential elements of a truly restorative workplace, one where respect, equity, and empathy are woven into the very fabric of the culture.
So we've talked about the what and the why of restorative justice in the workplace and even dived into those tricky pitfalls that can trip up even the best leaders. But now let's talk about the how. How do we actually create that community of care you mentioned? What does it look like in action?
Well, it's about going beyond simply reacting to incidents. It's about being more proactive.
Okay.
Imagine a workplace where instead of these microaggressions being swept under the rug or dealt with in hushed tones, they're seen as opportunities, right?
Okay.
Opportunities for learning and growth, both for individuals and for the organization as a whole.
It's about shifting from a culture of silence and fear to one of openness and understanding, where people feel safe speaking up.
Yes.
Knowing that their concerns will be taken seriously and addressed with empathy, not judgment.
Exactly. It's about fostering an environment where everyone feels empowered to say, hey, that didn't sit right with me and here's why. And having the other person be receptive to that feedback, even if their intentions were good.
It's about creating a space for those, sometimes uncomfortable, but ultimately necessary conversations to happen.
Right.
But what are the building blocks of that kind of environment? Where do we even begin?
It all starts with psychological safety.
Okay.
Both parties involved, the person who experienced the microaggression and the person who initiated it, they need to feel safe speaking openly and honestly without fear of retaliation or judgment.
That makes sense. It's hard to imagine having a productive conversation about a sensitive topic if one or both parties are walking on eggshells worried about saying the wrong thing.
Exactly. And beyond psychological safety, you need this foundation of trust. Trust in the process itself, trust in the facilitator's neutrality, and trust that the organization is genuinely committed to finding a resolution that feels fair and equitable to everyone involved.
So it's not just about having a conversation. It's about having that conversation within a framework that feels, safe, supportive, and impartial.
Precisely. And that's where the role of the organization comes in.
Right.
It's not enough to just say, we care about these issues.
Right.
Companies need to back up those words with tangible actions.
So what are some practical steps organizations can take to kind of demonstrate that commitment and create that foundation of trust?
First and foremost, clear and comprehensive policies around diversity, equity, and inclusion, those are a must. These policies need to clearly outline what constitutes unacceptable behavior, provide a roadmap for reporting incidents, and outline the process for addressing them in a fair and consistent manner.
So it's about having a clear framework in place so everyone knows what's expected of them and what to do if those expectations aren't met.
Exactly. But it's not enough to just have those policies, gathering dust on a shelf somewhere.
Right.
You need to bring them to life through training and education.
Okay.
Regular diversity and inclusion training for all employees, not just managers, is essential.
And not just a one-time thing, right? This needs to be an ongoing conversation, something that's like integrated into the company culture, not just a box to be checked.
Absolutely. It's about creating a culture of continuous learning and growth when it comes to these issues. And it's important to remember that creating a restorative environment, it isn't just about addressing harm.
Right.
It's also about acknowledging and celebrating the diversity that makes workplaces, richer and more innovative.
So it's about creating a space where everyone feels seen, heard, valued, and respected for who they are, their unique backgrounds, experiences, and perspectives.
Exactly. And when you create that kind of environment, you're not just preventing harm, you're fostering a sense of belonging, which is essential for, individual and organizational well-being.
This has been such an insightful conversation. As we wrap up, is there one key takeaway you want to leave our listeners with?
If there's one thing I want to emphasize, it's that creating a truly inclusive and respectful workplace, it's an ongoing journey, not a destination. It requires ongoing reflection, learning, and a willingness to challenge our own biases and assumptions.
It's about recognizing that we all have blind spots and that we can all benefit from listening to and learning from each other.
Exactly. And it's about approaching these conversations with empathy, humility, and a genuine desire to create a more just and equitable world, both within our workplaces and beyond.
This has been an incredible deep dive into a topic that's so relevant to all of us. I know I'm walking away with a lot to think about, both personally and professionally, and I hope our listeners are too.
Yeah, me too.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.
Intersections, conversations. Talk is cheap. We have explored key issues in developing better human relations, but it means nothing if you don't do something with our conversations. Race and differences are just obstacle illusions, so do something right where you are. Well, that's it for this intersection conversation, where diversity, equity, and inclusion meet.